So I'm going to suggest that we get started, even though I think there are some other folks who may join us, but we kind of have a packed agenda. Actually, we've got 3 speakers and other stuff going on. So I will call this meeting to order, and we can do a roll call.
All right, Mary.
Here.
Catherine.
Here.
Jeanette.
Here.
Ernest is not here yet. Jessica.
Here.
Wolfgang.
Here.
Sue.
Here.
Is Tobia here? No. And Andy, we got a message he will not be here. And Lindell.
Here.
Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute. And now we will join together to state out loud the mission of the Human Rights Commission. Act as a strong advocate to justice and equal opportunity
by
providing citywide leadership, guidance in the area of civil rights. Okay, thanks. And you all will note that one of our speakers, Rory Stolzenberg, is on. Thanks for joining us. And we've also got 2 additional speakers who will be joining us around 7. Dan Rosenzweig from Habitat for Humanity and Sunshine Mazin from Piedmont Housing Alliance. Okay, so next on the agenda are matters by the public. If there are members of the public who would like to speak, use the raise hand function on the webinar. Phone attendees can use *9.
We have 2 members of the public and no raised hands at the moment.
Okay. Well, we will have another opportunity for comments by the public, and we deeply welcome comments by the public. So we hope to hear from you all later in the meeting. We will move by commission response to matters by the public. And next on our agenda is approval of the HRC minutes from August 19th, 2021. We'll have a thumbs up or out loud yes for those
I have a typo.
Okay, great.
Issue that is that normally I wouldn't worry about typos, but I think it's a significant one. Now here I'm going to tell you where it is in the minutes.
Okay.
It's 4A, Roman numeral 3, regular 3A, Roman numeral 1. And it had to do with the name of the entity that is working on that issue, the Civil Rights to Council, with an E, not with an I. Okay, I mean, for me, that's a significant typo.
Absolutely. Thanks for catching that. I'll fix it and get it reset.
And I know this is going to be addressed later in the meeting, but 4A, Roman numeral 4, it's the land use process, not zoning. We aren't even at zoning yet. We are in land use. I didn't spend 8 years on that crazy planning commission not to know the difference between what we're looking at now and what we're going to be looking at sometime in the future. So tonight's discussion will be land use, not zoning.
Great. Yep. That sounds good. I'm not sure if that was said as zoning and we wrote zoning, or it was said as land use and we wrote zoning.
I'll tell you, our next door neighbor, they're all talking zoning, and I keep wanting to jump in and say, we're not there yet.
We'll make a correction on there though.
And which tells you I actually read the minutes.
All right, with that,
I'm quite in favor of approving them.
All right, with those modifications, let's see, thumbs up or an oral yes for those who would approve the minutes.
Can I do a
Yes.
vital thumbs up?
Okay. Any opposition to approval of the minutes?
Great. On my note, Mary, I'm abstaining.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
I wasn't there.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you. All right, so the next matter on our agenda is to move into closed session briefly. And I have never done that before, so I understand there's very specific language associated with moving to go into closed session. So I'm going to read the motion. Well, let me ask you this, Todd, am I allowed to make this motion as the chair, or does somebody else have to make this motion?
That is a fantastic question. You ought to
How
be on
about
the
if I read
safe
it?
side.
I'll read it and I'll ask if anyone would like to make the motion.
Frequently, the secretary of the body makes those motions, but Todd is the secretary.
All right, so
our ordinance.
I'm going to read the motion and then I'm going to ask somebody to move and then somebody to second it, because we have to use those sort of official formal rules for this purpose. Pursuant to section 2.2-3711 and 2.2-3712 of the Virginia Code, I hereby move that the Human Rights Commission close this open meeting and convene in closed session for the following purposes. 1, discussion, consideration, and or promotion of a prospective candidate for the position of the Director of the Human Rights Commission as authorized by Virginia Code section 2.2-3711A1. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Great. And as I understand it, we get off this link and get onto a different link.
You usually vote after a motion and a second.
Let me go ahead and call a vote.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
we did
of course.
in the old days.
Of course. No, we have to actually. The form
Yeah.
even says that. So thank you, Sue.
Right.
Yep, go ahead.
I'll go ahead and do that. So and you can just do a yes or a no, or aye or a no, as it says on the sheet there. Mary,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Jeanette,
Yes.
Ernest is not present. Jessica,
Yes.
Wolfgang,
Yes.
Sue.
Aye.
There you go, technical. Tabia, is she not here? Okay, not here. Andy is not here, and Lindell.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. I will see you all on a different link momentarily, and then we will reconvene for any members of the public. We will reconvene shortly on this link.
And I will remain here. Hi, Dan. Welcome to the meeting. Such as it is. I'm not sure when they're returning, but they're coming back eventually. So I'm just here at the moment while they're in closed session. Thanks for coming.
Okay. Has Sunshine joined yet?
Nope, I don't believe so. I don't see him on the list yet. So, but Rory is here, and you're here. So I think Sunshine will probably be here shortly.
And I don't have a clear idea of what people would like me to do. Is this a panel? Is this a presentation? Do you have any idea, Todd?
Yeah. So to the best of my knowledge, I think the interest they heard that that you and Sunshine had kind of been collaborating on some proposals around the land use plan.
Okay.
And so Rory is here, I believe, to give a bit of an overview of the commission's current work on the land use plan. And then I think they want to hear about what you and Sunshine's thoughts are on that, and then maybe have a Q&A afterwards. So that's pretty loose, but they're trying to learn and figure out where the commission may play a role in examining it from an equity lens.
Perfect. Good. And at the appropriate time, I'll be able to share my screen, will I?
Yeah, we can make sure that happens. I believe you're a panelist, so I think all we have to do is give you that permission, and you should be able to
awesome.
do it. In fact, you may already have it actually. If I'll check it out. Yeah.
Nope. Well, I guess it looks like someone else. It looks like Brian's sharing. So
yeah, Brian's sharing currently. So yeah, only when someone else is not. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. Yeah, I think I'm prepped. Let me pull up a document.
Okay.
Have myself ready. In the meantime, I'm going to mute myself so I can eat.
Yeah, please do. I was doing the same, so it's a good time for it.
Yep.
See you soon. Hello, Sunshine. Welcome.
Hey, Todd.
Hey, as you can see, they're in closed session right now, so, but I believe returning shortly.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, for sure.
So Sunshine.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hey.
So Todd just gave, I don't know if you had talked to Mary or anything. Todd just kind of gave me the rundown on what what they would like us to do. And
okay, I have not, so that would be great.
Looks like Rory's going to go first and sort of give an overview of where the city is and planning commission is on the future land use map. And then they want to hear, they had heard that we had made a presentation that sort of addressed equity issues in the land use map. I was thinking we would do this. I've got some slides actually that that show where some deed restrictions were, some pictures about what happened as a result of that, to give a little bit of an overview of the sort of the background of zoning and racial history. Probably take me a couple of minutes. You mind if I do that and then maybe turn over to you the standard description of the overlay?
Sure, that I think that's totally fine. I will say that, I have not updated any of it, since it's iterated a couple of times. So it'll be slightly old material, but the core principles are there.
Right, I've got yours up. I was going to, you want me to share that, or do you want to go ahead and share it? You can share, or tell you what, I can share that if you want. And either way, if you want to open it up and share it, you drive.
No, you can start. After Rory goes, you can go, and then depending, do you have the last version, one from July 13th?
I think I have the latest one. It's old, but I think I have the one that it starts with the narrative of the principles, and then
does it start with preamble, caveats, framework, concepts?
Let's see. Yeah, it says this proposal acknowledges the reality that growth and change is inevitable, that whole thing, or is there
There's
more
one version, I think a little bit later, because it opens up a little bit more before going into that.
Why don't you go ahead and, I'm not sure I have that version. Why don't you go ahead and pull it up? I'll just, after my thing, I'll stop sharing and let you share.
Okay.
All right, cool. Now I'm going to go away again or I'm going to turn off my camera so I can eat.
Yeah, I just had to change my clothes. I got caught in the rain out there at Little League practice.
Welcome back.
Thanks for your patience, Todd.
No
and
problem.
for our guests. Thank you for your patience.
You gave them a little bit of time to brainstorm, which was good.
Hey, Sunshine, I've never met you, but it's nice to actually see you.
Hi, Jessica. How are you?
I'm good.
All right, we are back, and I see that our speakers are here, and I'm
we have to.
I know we have to certify.
Yep,
I got it. I've got it right here. I just wanted to thank you all for being patient with us as we were in closed session. But so we need to certify. I'm going to read the certification of closed meeting, and then I'll ask for a motion and second. I move that.
This is the motion.
I know, but I think the chair's not supposed to make it. So
well, then I'll read it.
That's great, Sue. Go ahead.
Okay. I move that this commission certify by a recorded vote that to the best of each commission member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session. And we need a second.
Second. And then we need a
roll call vote.
A roll call vote.
Yeah.
Right, Todd? Yep. Okay.
Okay. Mary?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Jeanette?
Yes.
Ernest? Not here? No. Jessica?
Here.
Here, yes?
Here, yes.
Wolfgang?
Wolfgang, you're muted.
We didn't hear you. I think you're muted.
Oh, I said it. I'm muted. Okay, yes.
Okay. Sue?
I'm going to say aye again.
Great. Appreciate it. I don't believe Tabia is on. Andy has not joined us. And Lindell?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes.
Great. So I'm going to move to slightly out of order so we can turn over here to our speakers. I really appreciate all three of you being here. We are, as the Human Rights Commission, deeply concerned about issues of affordable housing, racial justice, and equity. And we know you all have a lot of information that you can bring to us. I think we were, planning to start with Rory Stolzenberg. And so if you want to, we don't have to do anything to unmute him, right? Because you're here as a panelist, right? All right, go right ahead. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me here. Good to be here with you guys this evening. Glad to see you taking an interest in the comprehensive plan. It's super important and has been a work of many years of effort. So just some high-level background on what a comprehensive plan is. The state of Virginia says that each locality has to update its comprehensive plan every 5 years to serve as a kind of overarching guide, particularly for land use and housing and commercial growth within the city, but really to guide almost every decision that the city is making. And so each 5 years, we update our plan to reflect our changing anticipation of how the city will change and what strategies we will use to deal with it. So you've probably heard in particular about one little bit of the comprehensive plan that takes up just a couple pages out of several hundred. That is the future land use map. And to be clear, that is, again, not a zoning map. I think was mentioned a little bit earlier. A lot of people are getting those kind of confused. It's more of a high-level overview of a vision that helps guide the zoning map that we create. So I guess I will share my screen here and give you a little bit of the history, and then I'll hand it over to Dan and Sunshine, and I guess we'll have like a kind of Q&A kind of panel. So again, this has been going on for quite a long time. Again, I said every 5 years we have to update it. For this particular plan revision, we have been updating it for about 4 3/4 years. So back in 2017, January, the Planning Commission started this update process. And that really kicked off with a whole series of community engagement over the course of 2017. So the kickoff was consisted essentially of just meetings in libraries and schools where people would come in and sit at a table and chat with planning commissioners and staff about the comprehensive plan process. And that really took place over May and June of 2017. As I'm sure everybody here recalls, events over the summer of 2017 significantly changed the outlook of how the city really viewed itself and the type of policies that we wanted to pursue. So after phase 1, it was sort of determined that the feedback we were getting was not terribly representative of the general public. We were suddenly getting lots of feedback generally about the city from the general public, in particular from low-income residents of the city who have been traditionally left out of modern decision-making. So they also kicked off a phase 2 in which planning commissioners went around the city to events that were already happening in the community and just tried to kind of accost people and ask them what they thought about housing and future land use and generally feelings about the city. And then phase 3, also in 2018, was a survey distributed both online and the mayor and vice mayor prior to that were helping to distribute it kind of door to door throughout the community to get as many responses as we could from people. So that was the 2018 process, about a year and a half of community feedback. And that went really straight into the Planning Commission taking all that feedback and concocting a plan. I'd also add in the middle there, back in 2018, we received the housing needs assessment from a consultant that we had commissioned that kind of analyzed kind of the census data in the city and housing available, and came up with this analysis, which determined the real affordable housing needs that we had in the city. From a combination of renters and in some cases homeowners that were severely cost burdened and cost burdened, which is defined as spending more than 30% or more than 50% of income on their rent. I just note that this is after adjusting for students. So of course, many student households have no income, but have significant spending power. The actual severely cost burdened rental households under 30% AMI is something like 2,300. But this is how many non-student households are spending more than 50% of their rent and have their income on rent and have less than 30% of the median income in the area. So overall, it ends up as the current day, which is actually 4 years ago now, is about 1,740 households under 30% AMI or extremely low income, an additional 810 households that are very low income, and overall a shortage of affordable housing units at 3,318, and that was expected to grow over time. So again, coming out of that 2018 like public feedback process, 2017, 2018, this was the draft of the land use map at the end of 2018 that came out of the Planning Commission and was presented to council. As you can see, particularly if I could zoom in and make this legend here, which is a little bit wordy, to be honest, visible, you can see that it's both kind of an increase in intensity contemplated across the city, with particular focus on near parks, near schools, more housing near UVA for students so that we could kind of keep them from spilling out into the rest of the community, and generally like along corridors and commercial corridors, which are kind of where housing growth had been anticipated to happen in the past, starting in the 2001 very corridor-centric plan. And then even in the lowest intensity areas, we anticipated allowing single family, townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes in order to really kind of break the cycle of exclusion that had happened over time. So for a little background on that, this is an excellent op-ed in Charlottesville Tomorrow from the head of the Fifield Neighborhood Association, Carmelita Wood. But it really goes into the history of how these land use restrictions, in particular restrictions on having housing, were driven by the Jim Crow era impulses towards segregation. And so, zoning, supposedly the story of zoning is, well, you could have a factory belching out noxious fumes, and we don't want that right next to people's homes. In practice, while it sort of originated as that, it very quickly became zoning between different residential categories. That's because explicitly racial zoning was ruled to be unconstitutional. So instead we turned towards density zoning as a proxy, using kind of class discrimination as a proxy for race, so that people who could only afford to have an apartment or to rent part of a duplex or a fourplex would be kind of forced out of neighborhoods where you only allowed single family detached homes only. And the motivations here were very explicit, right? This isn't just the effects of the policy, but actually you can see Harlan Bartholomew, who was the planner and the consultant that Charlottesville brought in to write our very first comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance that created single family zoning, explicitly talked about how this idea of R1 housing was to, quote, prevent the invasion of Negroes and prevent movement into finer residential districts by colored people. You really see this across the country. Bartholomew himself went to hundreds of different cities and other municipalities in order to create their zoning ordinances and their comprehensive plans, including ours. So that really forms the basis of kind of the fundamental sin in our pattern of land use policy. And in particular, all of our iterative maps over time, every 5 years, are all based in that fundamental wrong, that fundamental original pattern of development that was instituted by Bartholomew, and prior to that, that was about 1964, and by Seville and others from the initial zoning ordinance in 1929, which restricted the whitest and wealthiest areas of the city to two-family zoning. Actually, back then, they proposed single-family zoning, but some landowners fought it back. So anyway, that all gets us to, again, this draft land use map from 2018. And at this point, council kind of saw what a big change we were contemplating here to really create housing abundance throughout the city, and in particular, to allow more housing in formerly exclusionary areas. And they decided that at that time, and with both that looking us in the face and the need to create an affordable housing plan to focus specifically on affordable housing as well as all land use, as well as the idea of actually rewriting the entire zoning ordinance that would follow adoption of this comp plan, we really saw that we needed additional resources, and council decided to bring in consultants. So that brings us to our modern Seville Plans Together process. In early 2019, the decision was made to bring in consultants. And then in essentially late 2019, early 2020, the consultants were hired in response to an RFP, and that began this Seville Plans Together stage of the process. So this is a team that helped work on the West Main Streetscape, and they're brought in to do, again, all of the affordable housing plan, finishing the comprehensive plan, and rewriting the zoning ordinance to follow. So this was the first step. The affordable housing plan was adopted by council earlier this year. And it really foresees a significant change in how we approach affordable housing, starting with a significant $10 million a year funding commitment for affordable housing for the next 10 years, and in allowing more housing across the city in order to reduce the pressure on housing that's forcing housing prices to rise. And again, so funding subsidy, and then also tenants' rights, things like rent control, except unfortunately most of those programs are kind of, the state would have to explicitly authorize us to do it under the Dillon rule, except in cases where city funding is being applied, and we can add rules on top of that. So after we adopted that, we went on to the comprehensive plan, including the future land use map. And we've been through now several iterations of that, starting with our March 1 was the first draft released by them. And then let's see here, that kind of continued to iterate. They did their own rounds of community engagement, I should mention, in particular after that first draft was introduced. And that all led to these two maps. So this came out, again, following, this was right before the community engagement round. This was after the community engagement round, and up until about an hour ago was our latest draft over here on the right. Yeah, so essentially they released the land use map, and we have gotten many thousands of contacts from people in the community. Well over 1,000 different people have reached out expressing pleasure, displeasure, wanting to see less change, wanting to see more change, and again, lots and lots of feedback. And so that is essentially where we are today. So we have this draft future land use map, which in particular envisions heavier intensity along corridors, where in these medium intensity residential, up to 12 units would be allowed. And then in the general residential, we would allow 3 units, and then potentially up to 4 units if the fourth was affordable. I don't want to go too much into this because this apparently just changed an hour ago. But this is kind of the general idea, where, again, yeah, along certain corridors, it would allow up to 12, and then in most of the rest of the city, it would allow essentially triplexes. And then in the affordable housing plan, there's talk of when we do the zoning ordinance requiring some percentage of affordable units as part of that. Again, that will kind of be worked out later, but it's starting to really be folded into the plan, and you'll hear more about Dan and Sunshine's proposal in a second, and that will tell you all about it. So I guess one last thing I wanted to mention was that I know the Human Rights Commission has a particular focus on homelessness in our community. And one big change that isn't often talked about with regard to homelessness is that it's really driven, or in many ways, over time, single room occupancy styles of living, like we have at the Crossing with the program run with Virginia Supportive Housing, has been progressively outlawed and otherwise destroyed. And in many ways, that's kind of been a big driver of our current homelessness crisis. You know, especially as elsewhere along in the housing market, homes are getting more and more expensive, especially in the centers of metropolitan areas. Because all the denser forms of apartment style and plex style living have also been outlawed. SROs were just legalized in the city just a few years ago in order to enable the Crossings project, but they're still quite restricted, and that is not really something that we have covered in this whole process. With that, again, I will turn it over to Dan and Sunshine, and again, civilplans.org.com is the place to go to check out all these documents here. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
You're muted, Dan.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Rory. That was covered a lot of ground there. I'm going to retrod some of the territory and actually maybe go back just a little bit further to talk about the relationship between zoning and race and equity in the city of Charlottesville. But before that, I want to thank you all for inviting us to be here tonight. I really appreciate the work that you all do and really appreciate you giving us a forum to talk about couple of ideas that we think actually could take us dramatically in the direction of a more equitable Charlottesville. So what you're looking at is the current zoning map for the city of Charlottesville. This is actually, unlike the comprehensive plan, future land use map, this is actually the law. And so it's parcel by parcel, and in general, the lighter the color, the less intense the use that's allowed. And if it's yellow, there's only one thing that can be done on that parcel of land, and that's one single home. All seems kind of innocuous, and I think to most people who aren't as steeped in it as we are, it's kind of describing the way things kind of should be and always have been. My 8 years in the Planning Commission, it always felt very frustrated because our comprehensive plan wanted multiple things at once, many of which existed in a tension that was rarely ever talked about or worked out. One of which is that our primary ethos, or one of the driving factors in the way we do land use in Charlottesville, is this idea of neighborhood preservation. We need to keep things the way they are. We need to keep the historical fabric and character of the neighborhood. That always sort of bumped up in my head against the desire, equally strongly expressed in the comprehensive plan, for an equitable Charlottesville where there are affordable housing opportunities for everyone. So first thing to know about zoning is that it was intentional, and it was intentionally exclusive. And I think Rory kind of got to that. So what you're looking at is a plot of a block in north downtown Charlottesville. Again, equally innocuous. Pieces of land are carved up into lots. Each lot has a deed that says what can be done on the lot. Well, this is what, when you go to the courthouse and you pull the deeds for a fair number, we don't have the exact number in the city. We're still digging those out, but a large percentage, if not the majority, of lots in Charlottesville that were designated R1 had this deed restriction on it. No property in the subdivision shall be sold to any person not of the Caucasian race. So what did that do? Our neighborhoods formed, the R1 neighborhoods formed whites only. And in fact, it's more pernicious than that even. This was backed by federal rules and federal policy. So the federal home, the FHA, started guaranteeing loans to developers of larger subdivisions. Believe it or not, some of our what we consider our old neighborhoods were those subdivisions that were developed exclusively. The only way you could get financing is if they were whites only. And so this is, Rory brought up a sort of dark stain in our history, and that's when we were visited by a star urban planner named Harlan Bartholomew, who walked neighborhood by neighborhood and said, oh, this is a good neighborhood, this is worth preserving. Well, this one's kind of ramshackle, it's going to come down. And he his maps gave darker hatching to the neighborhoods that really kind of needed to be torn down. What's interesting when you look at some of these neighborhoods, I think we all recognize that these are some of the neighborhoods that were torn down in urban redevelopment. And when Vinegar Hill was torn down, with the bottoms, where Friendship Corridor was turned down. But one of the reasons why these neighborhoods were ramshackle is that the city did not extend water and sewer. They in fact bypassed the Black neighborhoods with public amenities. So a lot of these neighborhoods were still on well and septic, and were never invested in. The public domain, the right-of-ways were never invested in. And so they were a little ramshackle, but they were Black owned for the most part. They were Black businesses and Black residences. And so what did we do? We tore them down. Harlan Bartholomew's direction and our future land use map and our zoning code sort of pointed out the areas of blight. And this is the area around Ix. What you'll notice is a gridded pattern and then a big empty area. This is Belmont and this is the bottoms. This is where Friendship Court is. This is what it looked like then. And again, it was a little ramshackle, but it was mostly Black owned businesses and residences, and we destroyed them. We took away wealth. We took away ownership from largely the community of color in Charlottesville. And we built a lot of public housing, which at the time seemed like decent housing for folks, but it was never really built to last. It wasn't built of high quality, and it hasn't been maintained by HUD over the years. And it took away ownership, and it further segregated an already segregated city. So now, again, I put these two maps in juxtaposition, and you see that Harlan Bartholomew's explicitly racist map is the same map as our zoning map. Our zoning map, the darker colors are the areas of higher intensity or higher uses, more density, higher intensity uses are allowed. And these are the neighborhoods that were historically African-American neighborhoods. And the white neighborhoods are pretty much preserved with an R1 designation. Digging a little further, this is the orange dot map, which the darker the designation, Ridge Schuyler many years ago went parcel by parcel and pulled the incomes of residents who lived in those homes. It's the same map as the zoning map. The Charlottesville map in terms of equity is the same map in terms of poverty and zoning. And so in the midst of all this, we really applauded the Planning Commission taking a step back after 2017 and saying, hey, we can't do zoning as usual. I was on the Planning Commission for one, updated the comprehensive plan, and essentially the comprehensive plan update just said, yeah, let's tweak it, a parcel here, a parcel there, but let's leave it kind of the way it was, because this is the way things have always been. But the reality is things have not always been this way. They were intentionally made this way. And so we were very inspired by the work of the consultants in generating the housing plan. We felt like we were moving in a good direction, but we also saw a fairly typical Charlottesville Civil War emerging when a much more intensive future land use map came out, and the battle lines were drawn, right? In the largely historically exclusionary neighborhoods, people were talking about too much change too fast, changing the character and fabric of the neighborhood, hurting property values. But we also heard from folks in low-income neighborhoods that if you just simply up the density and intensity across the city, then gentrification and redevelopment is going to happen on our backs like it always is, because land prices are cheaper in the largely African-American neighborhoods. And so Sunshine and I kind of jumped into it at that point and thought, well, we actually think that if we sort of take away a little bit of the heat and the light and really listen to what people are saying, even the people who were anti-change in their neighborhood were almost uniformly saying, hey, we want affordable housing in our neighborhood. We just are concerned that this plan doesn't get us there. So we heard a lot of people railing against the idea of density for density's sake. And so Sunshine and I stepped up and said, look, we think that there's actually a solution. That's the solution that's been piloted in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that simply overlays the entire city and says, you can do more, you can get greater density, we can give everybody what they want, more affordable housing integrated into neighborhoods, and you can get more density if and only if what you build, in addition to what the base density is affordable. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Sunshine to give you a little bit more detail about what we had proposed. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Good evening, everyone, and those who are watching but not on the panel here as well. Also in like mind, thank you for inviting us to speak and share our thoughts. What I will go into here momentarily is a little bit dated in the sense that the comments that I'm going to highlight, they still reflect the core principles that that Dan was referring to a moment ago, but the future land use map has iterated a couple of times since then. So, but I didn't have time to adjust the comments. So I'll use the comments as a kind of a platform for discussion. But before I get into that, I want to highlight or bring up a couple additional things. One is that Charlottesville is not unique. What we are experiencing, what we see for growth patterns, development patterns, exclusionary zoning, all of that is true everywhere across the nation. No city has figured this out, how to do it, how to rectify, how to do it well. In recent years, in the last 2 to 3 years, a few cities are starting to experiment with how to do that. In particular, the first one that really took the big first step was Minneapolis. So Minneapolis a couple of years ago, essentially, it was coined eradicating or eliminating single family zoning. That's sort of true. Essentially what they did is they took all their R1 zoning or R1 equivalent zoning and basically just allowed 4 units of housing on all of it. Didn't really matter. It just kind of opened it up for development across the city and remove that sort of exclusionary, intrinsic exclusionary overlay. Portland, Oregon, and Oregon more broadly did something similar. Most recently, just a couple of months ago, Charlotte, North Carolina did something similar. And Dan referenced Cambridge, Massachusetts took a different tack. And about a year ago, instead of quote unquote eliminating single family zoning, they did this affordable housing overlay, which essentially privileges affordable housing so that it puts it into a special category that you get sort of special additional density and makes it more economically viable to build affordable housing on any given lot and gives it more rights that way. It's Cambridge specific. We couldn't just take the Cambridge overlay concept and apply it to Charlottesville. There's a lot of, we're different cities. And so there's differences that would need to be tweaked and thought through. But those were sort of inspirational components to kind of what Dan and I put together. The other thing I want to highlight is this moment in time of transitioning from an affordable housing plan into the comprehensive plan and future land use map that will then move into a rezoning is actually a rarity. Most cities might tackle an affordable housing plan or might tackle their comprehensive plan or might do a rezoning, but they haven't necessarily linked them all together. So we're actually pretty uniquely positioned in that regard and powerfully positioned from that perspective. And then the other thing, the last thing I'll say is that nationwide, there's a common conception that what we are seeing around affordability is a supply-demand issue. And there are, like any sort of semi-myth, there are kernels of truth to that, of course. But it is not just that. And I think it's really important as we think about where increased density goes and so forth. Every city in the country is 20 years behind in its production cycle. There is almost nothing we can do to catch up, so to speak, in that supply-demand ratio. Before the 2008 housing crisis, cities were already behind in terms of the supply. And then we hit this huge shortage and stoppage of additional housing creation, and it has just compounded. So the supply-demand aspect of what we're seeing in terms of the city here in Charlottesville and Albemarle County and the surrounding counties, that is, supply and demand plays a critical and significant role, but it is far from the only component of the layering. So with that, I'm going to share my screen as well. Give me one moment. And I'm going to share the text you see here first. And I'm just going to, for simplicity and consistency, I'm going to go ahead and read it. But for those of folks who want to kind of read it along with me, that's fine too. So the preamble, and remember, this is a couple weeks old. You can see that, a couple months old. You can see the date up here, July 13th. Over the last few weeks, Dan Rosenzweig and I have listened to and attended a variety of community-based and neighborhood meetings focused on the future land use map. The proposal we are going to discuss reflects our effort to distill the common ground from the spectrum of insights, concerns, and hopes that we've heard. Consistently across all discussions, we've heard the following. We've heard common praise for protecting and preserving historically Black and low-income neighborhoods. We've heard common support for addressing affordability broadly across the city. And that most everyone is okay with future affordable housing in their neighborhoods. And lastly, we've heard common concern that density for density's sake alone does not serve anyone well. The framework proposal that I'm about to share acknowledges the fundamental truth that growth and change is inevitable in Charlottesville. We cannot control this. What we can do is guide the character and purpose of this growth. This framework also acknowledges that existing neighborhoods are always experiencing change. If not in built form, then change is evident through dramatically increasing home values, which results in a changing arc over time of who can afford to live there. The proposal is a framework only. Our effort has been focused on establishing common ground that can be used as a purposeful, vision-driven foundation to guide the city's future. This foundation will require subsequent detailed analysis and discussions through the zoning update and other topics. And lastly, the framework will rely on the future land use map being a living document. We, the collective we, will never be able to detail a vision that fully accounts for all future outcomes. The future land use map must be able to adapt and refine over time. The first key concept in our proposal is to create a low intensity residential land use category. And I'm going to pause here for a second, which is in the current proposal, they're calling sensitive areas or sensitive neighborhoods. That's the phrasing they've taken upon the consultants have. This land use would be the base land use for historically Black and low-income neighborhoods to reduce development pressures by essentially keeping in place existing density allowances in those neighborhoods. I'm going to pause again for a second and to say that the approach that the consultants are taking is not quite that. It's a different flavor of that, but they're holding on to the kind of core principle. The second key concept in our proposal is that all other residential portions of the city would have a base land use of the currently proposed general residential land use category. Recognizing that growth has been historically accommodated on the backs of lower income neighborhoods, this would shift growth patterns to higher income areas. In effect, all residential areas of the city would have a base land use of either low intensity residential or general residential. So this was our proposal a couple of months ago, pausing again. This was our proposal a couple of months ago. The consultants have not moved forward with that basic concept. They have tried to take the kind of core principles that we're talking about here and kind of feather them into a more nuanced land use map overall. Under the principles of number 4, under the principles of all kinds of housing for all kinds of people in all kinds of places and density with purpose, higher intensity land uses would be allowable if and only if affordable housing is part of any higher intensity development. Essentially what we're stating there is that you would have a base level of allowable density across the entire city. And if you wanted more, affordable housing would have to be part of it. It wouldn't be just affordable housing, but affordable housing would have to be part of it. Number 5, functionally, as a layer on top of these base land uses, the proposal recommends that medium intensity residential is a by right use in all residential parts of the city, if and only if affordable housing is part of that proposed development. This recommendation privileges affordable housing and guides density with purpose in all neighborhoods. And then further, the proposal also recommends that high intensity residential is a by right land use in specific scale and context appropriate parts of the city, if and only if affordable housing is part of any proposed development. Importantly, governed by practical constraints, topography, lot sizes, infrastructure, etc., we fully anticipate the need for gradations of middle and high intensity residential in different parts of the city. And again, our proposal is intended to establish common principles that drive the next stage of detailing. In particular, one of the most important set of details that will need to be worked through is the specifics of affordability. This proposal does not yet tackle these details. Recognizing that each detail has both community impact and financial impact, this detailing process needs to determine the minimum percentage of affordable units in a particular development, the depth of affordability of those units, and the length of time those units must stay affordable. I'm going to pause here for a second and also say the tweaking of those levers is extraordinarily difficult, in part because if you just go with your kind of your gut check hardcore principles and say really deeply affordable units for long periods of time and lots of them all at the same time, that costs a lot of money. And unless you have subsidy at play, and if a regular developer has to do all those things, essentially it stops development. That's one side of the equation. On the other hand, if you go really light on the levers, only a few units of affordability, not very deeply affordable, and they only have to be affordable for 5 years or something, then you'll get lots of development, but then you don't get much impact. And so there is a sweet spot that is different in different parts of the city. It's different from city to city, different from state to state. And so there's a lot of analysis that needs to go into that tweaking. In closing, we have 2 key additional comments. This framework does not address every concern of every neighborhood, and fundamentally no proposal ever will. What our framework does is set forth a practical vision for growth with purpose, privileging affordability as a central tenet of the city's future. And lastly, this is really, really important. This proposal recognizes that a good land use policy and well-crafted zoning structure are necessary, but wholly insufficient ingredients in guiding the city to one that works for everybody. Good land use and effective zoning must be coupled with a full panoply of other necessary interventions as laid out in the recently adopted Affordable Housing Plan: adequate funding, rapid development approval processes, tenant protections, etc. If you and so just to really strike that home, this future land use map and the coming zoning are critically important. But if that's all we do, it doesn't matter. We have to follow through on the additional $10 million a year in funding, the tenant protections, pursuing as much as we can across the spectrum. And like I said at the beginning, there is no jurisdiction anywhere in the country that has solved this problem sufficiently. It's an overwhelming statistic, but I'll share it anyway. There is no county or city anywhere in the nation, bar none of them, where a person making minimum wage can afford a 2-bedroom apartment market rate. Our housing system as a whole is broken, and the only way to start to address it is with every tool and every tool belt and toolbox applied all at the same time. The future land use map and the zoning are big pieces of that. They provide I don't know how to extend the metaphor, but they provide like the toolbox itself. And then you need all the tools inside of it to do the actual work. So it's just critically important. So just to highlight in map form what I was sharing, and I apologize for this thing here. I can't move it. Zoom has stuck it there for me and I can't get it out of the way. So my apologies. This was the future land use map a couple of iterations ago. So take that for what it was then. Our proposal, if you remember, basically highlighted low intensity residential and general residential as the primary land uses throughout. So that map would look something like this. So essentially this sort of paler peach color here, and these aren't our exact boundaries, these are just sort of an estimation, would be protecting historically Black and lower income neighborhoods. And then the rest of the city, which is more traditionally R1, would have this general residential overlay. And then essentially, you can see them side by side right there. And then essentially in our proposal, which is the right one, you can do higher intensity development, medium intensity and higher intensity, again, if and only if affordable housing is a portion of it. So I will stop sharing my screen and pause, and I think we open up for Q&A and discussion.
Thank you. That was really very informative. Fantastic. I do have a question about you referred to tenant protections kind of toward the end. What specifically, if anything, did you mean by that?
So in the affordable housing plan, the consultants actually suggest a number of tenant protections, everything from capitalizing access to lawyers for eviction prevention to potentially rent control, although that's something that would have to be enabled by the state legislature. Those are the two that pop into mind. I'm sure there are others that are listed in there, but they're in that document that Rory was showing at the beginning.
Thanks.
Yeah, the other two are essentially any development that has city assistance to push for those extra rights that the city or that we haven't gotten from the state. And just cause eviction, which again would require state approval unless we were giving it a development money and had that kind of leverage to get them to agree with it.
And actually, I'd like to add one that's not on that list now that I think of it. They're in a couple of jurisdictions, Washington, D.C. being one of them. There's a growing movement to do essentially what's called the first right of refusal, so that if a rental building comes up for sale, there is a short period of time in which the tenants themselves have the first right to purchase that property. It is difficult to bring from concept into fruition without a whole lot of back-end infrastructure and funding and support to make that happen. But there is precedent in other places in the country for that, where that does happen.
I have a question, and this may just be because I have trouble really understanding. It's a pretty complicated, set of issues here. When you talk about medium density corridors and adding additional housing in there, that you have to have affordable housing as part of it, what does that mean for something like wanting to build a fourplex? Which I would think we would want to have by right in as many places as possible, really.
So the draft that Rory referenced that came out about an hour ago, I have not reviewed it directly, but Dan and I met with the consultants a few days ago to kind of hear where they were headed with it. Essentially, in the general residential category, which is, again, the majority of the city overall, they would allow for quads, for threeplexes and fourplexes. The nuance change that I hope made it in there, which we talked to them about, is that if you have a site, let's say an existing site with a single home on it right now, if you have a site with a single home and you want to build it out to either do an addition, or it's a large lot and you can add a couple buildings in the back, or replace it with a fourplex, some various combinations there, that you would have the first unit that you already had there would be market rate, your choice, you do what you want with it. The next one would be the affordable one. And then you would get up to 2 more market rate beyond that. So that we build in the affordability at the front end, and this was Dan's kind of brilliant idea. Instead of leaving it to the 4th of the units, then basically they would never get built. You make it the 2nd, and so you can get the extra 2 more. So in the medium intensity actually goes above and beyond that. Medium intensity is like the 5 to 12 units per building kind of range.
Got it. I guess the reason I asked is because, of course, I would think as a Human Rights Commission, we would prefer like a fourplex over a triplex to get the accessibility built in, right? Because if you've got 4, then you're forced to build accessible housing, as I understand it.
I'm not sure I understand the connection there, Catherine.
So
could you explain that a little bit better?
I think Rory is going to jump in and say it better than I could.
Okay.
Yeah, so at the 4th unit in a building is when the FHA accessibility requirements kick in. A lot of people call it ADA, but actually for housing, it's in the FHA, the Fair Housing Act. And so once you have 4 units, every unit on the ground floor has to be built accessible. And if you have an elevator in the building, then every unit has to be built accessible, which means that at that 4th unit, there's a little bit of an increase in cost. But it means typically 2 units would be on the ground floor, and those would both have to be accessible. So I think there's been a little bit of talk about outside of so in the draft that just came out, that 2nd unit being affordable is for sensitive areas. And then for general residential outside of sensitive areas, here, I'll pull it up on the screen. It allows up to 3 units and then kind of unspecified affordability bonuses beyond that. So I think there's been some talk about making it 4 units, and then the inclusionary / bonus program would kick in after that in order to incentivize a pair of accessible units, really.
So as a practitioner and also as a former planning commissioner, if this holds, if it's up to 3 without affordability, and then the 4th one has to be affordable, we won't get any affordable housing. There's very little incentive baked in for somebody. Somebody will go up to 3 units. And to me, a critical principle moving forward in all of the proposed upzonings or extra allowances is that the first extra unit needs to be affordable. With regard to the 4-unit FHA thing, I think we're going to have given the fact that we're on sloping terrain, there aren't very many, essentially what you're going to see in this kind of zoning change is the possibility in formerly exclusionary areas of turning a single home into 3 or 4 units. Starting with the structure that exists, I think you're going to have a hard time building in accessibility to some of those one way or another, because many of them don't have 0-step entry. Probably the strongest mechanisms for creating accessibility are public funding mechanisms. When the city funds an affordable unit, there's a requirement for things like 0-step entry, visitability, etc. And then a number of federal and state programs also have those same requirements. Those are probably stronger than the FHA stick. I see a couple of hands up, but I don't want to overtalk.
Jeanette?
Todd and Ernest both have their hand before mine. Thank you.
Okay.
I defer to Ernest.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions, and any of the 3 of you guys can answer that. Thank you for being on tonight. Sorry, I'm a little late. I had something to do. One, my concern is there has been, from what I understand, a tradition in Charlottesville where developers will say that they're going to make something that's marketed to affordable, and there's going to be some affordable housing in units and things like that. And then they decide halfway through the project that they're not going to, and decide to pay a fine to build whatever they want. Does this, what you guys are talking about with the density and fair housing, does that take that away? Meaning developers can't change their mind, that they have to develop what they said they're going to do when they're doing affordable housing? That's my first question.
The short answer to that is we can tie it to them getting actually a certificate of occupancy. In other words, they would not be able to actually complete their construction without complying.
Awesome.
Yeah, so some background there. Until last year, we had pretty limited authority from the state to require affordable units. And so the authorization that we had said that we could require units, except that they can be on-site or off-site, or they can pay a per square footage dollar amount into the fund. And we weren't allowed to tell them which ones they could pick. And so last year in 2020, the General Assembly passed a different authorization for the city that actually Albemarle has had for quite some time, where we can essentially craft whatever program we'd like to. So we can set the incentives and requirements as we'd like now.
Awesome, thank you. And oh man, I just lost my second question. Oh my goodness. Go ahead, Todd. I'll come back if I need to.
I'll defer to Jeanette and I'll go after.
So my understanding, thank you all for that presentation. I've heard this so many times and I learn so many new things each time. My understanding is that your initial recommendation was to require the second unit be affordable both within and without the sensitive areas. Is that correct? Yes. And so the current plan that just came out an hour ago included that, but only in the sensitive areas. Is that right?
It seems that way, and that's something in the conversation we had with consultants a few days ago, where we encouraged them to bring some consistency to that.
I think that I know we're not at this point yet of deciding on our recommendations, but I would just say I think that would be something that the Human Rights Commission could easily support in a letter to the CVille Plans Together team. It seems like a really critical piece to moving forward, and I would like to see that expression of support.
So if I could just jump in there, I think part of the reasons, their motivation for doing that is that if you look at the distribution of housing costs throughout the city, So these are homes by assessment, and the green to red is the residential units, not including apartments. And so you can see there are parts of the city where kind of your average cost is well over double for a home, is well over double what you'd see in the rest of the city, right? And so for some areas, if you allow 3 units, even just 3 units alone, it might not. Sorry, I just started animating and that is killing my computer. Even 3 units alone at market rate might not pencil versus just one large single family house. Actually, in many areas of the city, we see that where we had non-conforming duplexes, and again, every neighborhood in the city has duplexes because back in 1929, we only downzoned to 2 family. We're seeing that those duplexes are being bought up and then deconverted. So they're being knocking down the wall in the middle and converting into a single unit. And so if we're gonna make every neighborhood in the city more accessible to more families at a lower income than live there now, I think that's the motivation behind allowing a few units by right in those. And then the big change, I think, in those areas in the draft, and again, I just saw this 30 minutes ago and was reading it in your closed session. So it's allowing up to 3 units by right, but then unlike the last draft, which said basically you can build a 4th unit, but it has to be affordable, and there's no incentive to do that. We're not really giving you any reason why you would do it. The implication here is that I think more than 4 units would be allowed if you start putting in affordable units at kind of a level we determine. Where actually I should have mentioned they have $1 million contract for the 3 plans, and then council recently awarded another $150,000 for them to kind of do the math on inclusionary zoning and make sure that it works, right? And like developers will actually do it. Otherwise, we can make as many changes as we want, but we can turn up the dial so restrictive that no change actually happens. And in effect, we have the same zoning we had before. And so I think in those in the most expensive places, you might allow 3 by right, and then the 4th would have to be affordable. And in return, you would get potentially even 2 extra units on top of that, or 3 in a way that those market rate units, despite the high cost of the land, though they might rent for more because they're in the more desirable neighborhoods, will cross-subsidize the affordable unit that we're acquiring in a way that makes the finances still work out so that the change actually happens.
Yeah, and let me just say that Rory, I have not reviewed it in the depth that Rory has in the last 30 minutes. And I will say that it's nuanced enough that without a deep dive, it's hard to know exactly what's in there quite yet. So. Yeah,
there's kind of gotten to be more words in every section as we make all these revisions.
I mean, the one thing I would point out, this is, Rory and I agree on probably 90% of stuff. This may be a place where there's a little bit of difference in how we look at it. The reality is that to meet a certain income threshold as per HUD definition, it's not a tremendous burden if one of the units has to be affordable no matter where it is. Fair market value for a 2-bedroom unit is something like $1,200 or something like that at 80% of area median income or something like that. So if one of your units if you can get 3 units and one of them has to be rented for $1,200, I don't think I think these things will largely still pencil.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it's the level of affordability is a big factor where fair market rent is about 60% AMI, and maybe and we talked about trying to get deeper affordability where we can, and especially focusing city resources on the families in the most need. But if we can hit 60% AMI, that's essentially the limit. Actually, a little above that is where you can apply housing vouchers, and then we can layer kind of subsidies on top. So we have the units. Right now, we have people with housing vouchers that can't find anywhere to attach them to. And then we would get a unit that you could use a housing voucher on. We could even probably get them kind of first dibs on that unit. And in that way, even at that higher level where, like Dan said, it's really not that much below market rent, it will still pencil out regardless.
And then if I could just ask a second question, per Ernest's question about requiring them. Sunshine, your answer was yes, that you could put in a requirement. Does the current plan include that requirement, or are you just saying that could be done?
Yeah, it's in there now. It wasn't in, basically before Dan and Sunshine released that, it wasn't really in there. There was kind of a vague talk in the affordable housing plan about having a requirement of some percentage. I think that was in particular focused on like the larger multifamily units. Like we kind of focus a lot on the general residential and the medium residential. There's also all of the kind of commercial corridors and denser places where you'd be building larger apartment buildings or mixed use buildings. And so starting with Dan and Sunshine, I think we've really talked about bringing that requirement in to apply to those sort of small scale, missing middle and soft density types of housing, the plexes. And again, they kind of didn't really factor those in the first draft, the August draft, after Dan and Sunshine released that. And then Planning Commission really said, hey, no, we like this idea. It's a good one. And so it looks like this draft is starting to do that. So it would be, currently it's required for all units above a single family house in the sensitive areas. And then it would be required for anything larger than a triplex in the non-sensitive areas. And it would also be mostly required in medium, I believe. I haven't looked at that slide yet, totally.
The other thing
I wanted to flip over to Todd because he hadn't had a chance to ask his question. So you want to jump
Can I
in?
say one other comment just to flesh that out a little bit though, which is, and this relates to what Ernest was asking as well. I think there are actually two layers to your question, Ernest. One is the making sure it's that affordability is embedded within the project without a developer being able to back out. The second is the long-term compliance, ensuring that they once you set it aside for 60% AMI or whatever it is, that someone actually income qualifies. And I would say that, you know, there are many cities out there who have sufficient staff capacity at the city level to manage and verify that. Charlottesville currently is not one of those cities. Whether we become that or not, I don't know. But there also is precedent in many cities for the city to contract with a third-party entity to do that verification. And that could be an organization like Piedmont Housing Alliance, because we do that with our own properties anyway, or it could be New Hill, or it could be any number of organizations that already have the capacity and expertise to do that work. So that would have to be part of this too.
Todd?
Thanks. Yeah, so I think my question is related because I'm thinking about, you know, the commission has a mandated an ordinance to provide recommendations to city council for the annual legislative agenda, which then gets taken up to the General Assembly by TJPDC. And so I'm thinking about enabling legislation at the state level that would allow for some of these protections. I heard rent controls mentioned. I'm very interested in hearing and thinking about what enabling legislation would look like that would allow municipalities to set rent controls, and particularly in alignment with HUD payment standards for vouchers, right? So, I mean, right now we have a state law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of source of funds. But what I'm seeing anecdotally, I don't have hard data on this, but what I'm seeing anecdotally is around the city and in surrounding areas, rents on once voucher payment standard usable, let's say, properties, those rents are now being raised beyond the payment standard as a way of excluding voucher holders. And so I'm really curious about ways we can make sure that people aren't getting around fair housing law in kind of sneaky ways. And in addition to that, I think about, as you mentioned, you know, third party to sort of verify that those who are renting meet the standard. I'm also interested, you know, other cities are doing proactive rental inspection and in turn creating rental registries. And I think a couple of years, maybe a year ago, we lifted one recommendation up to council that enabling legislation be created at the General Assembly level such that a municipality could create a rental registry. Because right now we have tax assessment records, but that doesn't tell you what units are rented and it doesn't tell you who the landlords are or what the cost, what things are renting for. And in addition to being able to proactively inspect those units to ensure healthy and safe housing, it would also create a clear inventory. And we've talked about this in other meetings, a clear inventory of what exists as a rental property in the city. And we don't have that. So I'm curious if you're, this may be beyond the scope of the comprehensive plan, but what could the commission do to lift enabling legislation recommendations to council such that some of these protections might be set in place?
That seems like a great idea to me. That's exactly what we would need to do to bring it to council, to bring it to our legislative team. And those are great ideas, I think, in particular.
Yeah, I would add, if I remember correctly, I have not looked in a little while, but I believe the Affordable Housing Plan identifies the pinch points that they see. So I think it's worth reviewing that document to see what enabling legislation would be helpful from their perspective. Additionally, I will say that a couple of years, maybe it was last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, it's a little bit different. It's not so much about enabling legislation, but it is pushing for sort of affordable housing and affordable home ownership in general. The Virginia Housing Alliance, which is a statewide advocacy organization, has been pivotal in getting significant change over the last couple of GA sessions in terms of funding and other measures. Not perfect, but significantly impactful. And there is going to be a new batch of bills, we don't know exactly what, that Virginia Housing Alliance will get behind. And a couple of years ago, I advocated that the city support Virginia Housing Alliance's legislative agenda and explicitly do so, and that other cities do the same. So that we're not ready for that. That's not, it's queuing up still, but I would recommend that's also a path forward.
Catherine, I see you've had your hand up for a bit.
Yeah, do others have their hand up? I've already spoken, so no? Okay. So I guess my question at this point is, as the Housing Commission, I think you've given us a couple of ideas in terms of advocating for enabling legislation and some other things. Jeanette suggested that we can write a letter, particularly supporting one aspect of things we've talked about tonight. What specific actions of the Human Rights Commission would be helpful in ensuring that we have a solid plan moving forward?
Not to be coarse about it, but money. I mean, back to my earlier point, like the city of Charlottesville has actually, in the last few years, has done, prior to COVID, so that's obviously its own scenario here. But prior to that, the last couple of years, from one perspective, the city of Charlottesville has done an extraordinary job of committing resources, the redevelopment of Friendship Court, the redevelopment of public housing. It has fallen down on support for home ownership, affordable home ownership, affordable repair for existing homeowners. We have failed to support those sufficiently, to fund those sufficiently. The Affordable Housing Plan explicitly calls out for a series of things that need to be funded, which are holistic and comprehensive. And unless we do it, we're dead in the water. And you know, a few weeks ago, CHALK, which is the Charlottesville Affordable Housing Coalition, of which Habitat and Piedmont Housing Alliance are members, we submitted an email to City Council basically highlighting over the next 3 years, we actually have collectively a really significant pipeline of potential projects and ways we can impact positively the existing housing challenges in the city, but we cannot do it unless we have in partnership with the other funding sources, having city funding. And so it's really, really critical. So I'll leave it at that. Dan, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
Well, I would add on just a little bit by saying that platform is burning hot right now, because the CIP process is underway. So the city affordable housing money is allocated via the capital improvement program. There is a lot, in the wake of COVID, there is a lot of federal money out there, but most sources of federal money require a local match. So for example, we build a house, we often will have a couple $100,000 of subsidy. It's not unusual for us to have a couple $100,000 of subsidy in a house so that the low income homeowner can earn equity. But there are sources of funding, for example, affordable housing or affordable and special needs housing, which is $70,000 of subsidy a unit. The city just has to come up with something like I think it's a 10% match or a 20% match to that. And so if there's no money, there's no time to put this off for another year or two. This coming up CIP, which is being formulated right now, has to have money in it for a variety of housing solutions on the housing ladder. Otherwise, we are not going to be eligible for billions and billions of dollars of federal money that's out there that will go to another municipality. So this the $10 million annual contribution can't be a can that's kicked down the road, because we will lose this perhaps generational, once in a lifetime opportunity of stimulus money that's out there.
Ernest, you still have your hand up, so I wasn't sure if you had another question or that was just a relic.
I did, and Dan just kind of answered it for me, because my concern was what Sunshine had brought up in that summary of the consultants. And my question to him was going to be, there's a lot of doom and gloom in that, meaning that no municipality has done this yet. Every city's dealing with this, but nobody has figured it out. And my question was going to be, what are we going to do to stick our foot in the ground and say, this is what we need to do? And what Dan just kind of brought up recently gives me a little hope that hopefully we can move on that and not lose that $10 million. Because I agree, if we don't, every year that we put that $10 million in is going to be scooped up for something else because it didn't move or we didn't do anything with it. And that's my concern, that we'll find another project to put that $10 million in because we're not doing anything with affordable housing. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I think we all are, very grateful to the three of you for coming and sharing your expertise and these ideas. And we, as a Human Rights Commission, are deeply, deeply committed to the creation of a more racially just and equitable city. And so you've given us a lot to work with and think about. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good night.
So I do have a question before we move on to the discussion, which is that, is there some actual time in which they turn off our Zoom, or are we permitted to sort of go beyond our 8:30 deadline?
Brian is usually very kind to us, and currently we are the only webinar that he is overseeing tonight. So I'll let him chime in to be specific, but I think we have some flexibility.
I have put in a few more quarters.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Right. So just as a follow-up to the discussion that we just had, I welcome people's thoughts about kind of what steps that we should as a commission take. I will say this, it is my view that this is a very important moment in time, and the perspective of the Human Rights Commission could be could be important. And I would like to see us take action in this space, but certainly want to hear from folks. Jeanette, do you have was that a hand raise?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, I agree. I think it is a really critical moment. I think writing a letter and even going to council, or maybe it's the planning commission, I'd have to look at the calendar and see what's next. To expressing support, I'm still like, I think what sounded most compelling to me is to support the second unit model that they proposed, as well as the 10 million real estate tax, right? That's going to come from the real estate tax, which is a joint effort with the school board. So both of those issues, if I'm getting it all right, I think those are the two things that I would recommend that we support right now. Probably others too, but that's what I can think of.
Wolfgang?
Thanks. Yeah, I was, my thought is that every year when we consider legislative priorities that we advise City Council, the past 2 cycles when I've been on that, we tend to be like, we need to do this, but I feel like we are missing opportunity to really advise City Council on the additional things they need to advise the state on that go hand in hand with updating our zoning. So the next time we have that opportunity, let's be prepared for it so we can make those recommendations.
Ernest?
I would say push City Council to go after that stimulus money.
Sue?
Yeah, I'm unfortunately one of these visual people, and I would love to see some of the slides and materials that they presented. I've been paying attention to various conversations around this, and I think maybe all that we could do is ask council for following up on it, all of the monies that they possibly can get to do anything in terms of speaking to any specific proposal that's in either one. I mean, Dan and Sunshine have a proposal that I don't think, unless I can see it, is in the zoning, I mean, the land use plan currently that is being voted on and forwarded to council. My problem is I have to see some of this in print before I know exactly what I'm looking at. But I can see us pushing council to go after whatever monies they possibly can to make our affordable housing plan work, because that's really where we're at right now. I'm not prepared to speak to the land use plan per se yet.
I have been concerned about, I would say, some of the public discourse and narrative about the I don't know if you say flume or flum or the future land use map, that it has, the sort of neighborhood preservation rhetoric. I think, it seems to me that the Human Rights Commission could speak to some of that and say, we need to be framing this discussion in terms of our commitment to, equity and racial justice.
So I guess what I see is we talk about, I keep saying this, we talk about structural inequity and structural racism, and this is literally structural racism, and we have this opportunity to change it, right? This is what we talk about doing, and this is our moment. So in all of these meetings, there is a long line of wealthy people in expensive homes that speak at every single meeting, and they speak in terms of neighborhood character, et cetera. And so I think as commissioners and as individuals, we need to be showing up to the meetings and making comments. I would like us as a commission to be sending in written comments, and maybe we can have some discussion about to what extent we can represent ourselves as human rights commissioners as we speak in the Planning Commission and then City Council. I think we have to do it in both places, right? Something goes to Planning Commission, they vote, they propose to City Council, and then City Council votes. So we've got to be saying it to both bodies. But the comments are ugly. If you guys are following it, it is appalling.
I mean, it seemed to me clear from the conversation that we have a lot of folks who are commissioners who, you know, have spent a lot of time already thinking about this and, you know a lot. I mean, one suggestion I might make is to have a small group of folks, you know, come together to put some kind of written comments together. I don't know if it's, I mean, I'm happy to participate in that, but maybe that we should draw on the expertise of kind of
what you know. Couldn't our housing committee, we have a housing committee. I'm going to hear from them later on, but this is, the land use is, besides other things, it's going to tell how it's going to deal with housing more than anything else. It doesn't pay much attention to commercial businesses and industry and so forth. The housing is a big thing in the land use plan and in any zoning that comes out. That's what people are interested in. So I'm curious as to where the housing committee is on that, since I missed any meetings of them.
Yeah, I just meant to suggest that I think there are people who are not on the housing committee who clearly have spent some time kind of, you know, doing some thinking and work on this that might be, people who could participate, but you know, I'm certainly open to the views.
I wish Andy was here because he's been quite vocal on the chats that I've been seeing.
Jeanette, was that your hand?
Thank you. I agree with Catherine. I think it's critically important. I think also, so I am on the steering committee. My organization was invited on the steering committee because we're doing work with the city around food equity. So not about the land use plan so much, but about other aspects of the city. And we've made all kinds of recommendations outside of the public comment, like through pulling people together, gathering comments, getting signatures, and we've had like 61 recommendations included in. So I think the public comment, like contrasting the ugliness that we do here in the public comment would be important, but I also think doing like a behind the scenes, really good, thorough letter is as significant. The Seville Plans team has been, I think they understand the disproportionate squeaky wheel factor that's going on with the presentations.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I guess the question is like, how do we want to get that done, right? Do we want to put together a small group of folks to draft something, or what is, you know, what do people think is the best way to make this happen?
I think Sue's right that the housing subcommittee already exists and we can do it through that.
And encourage other folks to then maybe join the committee if they're interested in this issue in particular, right?
Yeah, we can make a draft available to everyone. Yeah.
What is the next time that y'all are meeting? I think we're coming up close to when they would make a presentation with a final draft. Is that correct? Rory, do you know how much time we have?
I'm sorry. Yes, supposedly the final work session on the future land use map is next Tuesday, the 21st. And then I think there will be a little bit of discussion on the chapters there too. And then the following meeting after that for the Planning Commission is the second Tuesday in October. And that is when we will, in theory, be voting on a final draft and to approve it. I'm not quite sure if there will necessarily be like amendments made at that meeting. It's possible, I think. And then following that, it will go to City Council for a first hearing in November. At that point, Council might make any amendments it likes. And then Council is expected to approve it in December.
All right, well, so we need to get moving.
Did you see Ashley's comments, Mary?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
She's saying, I would suggest drafting via Google Documents so you all can draft comfortably without calling a meeting, so long as no more than 2 of you are in the document at one time.
Oh, that is clever. All right.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea.
All right. And Todd, do we have standard, set times now for committees? So the Housing Committee, did we get there? I know we talked about it.
I don't think so, because folks wanted to do some midday meetings last time, and so we shifted that from the 6:30 time. So
can Housing Committee? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, can we claim the first Thursday in October?
At what time? 6:30, or a different time?
Can we do that midday time again? That was kind of awesome.
Perhaps.
What time is it?
I don't remember what we did.
I think we did 1 or 1:30. I'm gonna look back, and I promise not to reverse the weeks on you this time. I'm embarrassed that I did that, but
so that would be October 7th.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Would you like a 1 or 1:30?
1 is fine.
1. I don't know if Brian, is that acceptable? If you can make that call now. I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Anything else on this topic?
But we need to comment before Tuesday.
So we can work on a document via Google Docs, and Mary can make comments as the chair without us having a vote per se. Does that work?
Mary, how do you feel about being part of the commission meeting on Tuesday?
I would really, love some help in kind of thinking through the points that we want to make, but I'm very happy to do that. All right, so shall we move back to our regular agenda? All right, I skipped over and took out of order business matters, including the OHR staff report.
I'll be very brief. The report is attached. Please go ahead and check it out, read it. If anyone was interested in joining the outreach that we were going to do, I think it was originally scheduled for September 24th. It's been moved to October 1st. So just to note if that was of interest to you, but otherwise you can read the report, and if you have questions, just let me know.
All right, next on our agenda is the chair update, and I'm going to punt that because I think most of my updates are actually related to the housing committee. So we can, if we just move on to the committee discussions, then I can share my updates then. So I think next up we have ad hoc committee updates, and we've got the accessibility committee up first.
All right.
Last week we met to draft a proposed resolution, which you will find at is an attachment 6. I emailed it out on Tuesday for everybody to take a look at and to come ready with comments. So I'd say fire away. Also, can we do a temperature check? I don't know if people are like exhausted or prepared. Sue is nodding that I don't know. So exhausted and prepared are both yes and no questions. And so I'm not sure if a shaking of a head or I'm not sure which direction that goes.
Yeah, we certainly had a lot on our
comment after this meeting.
I'm just wondering if everybody read it because it came out this afternoon.
Well, I had emailed this document out 2 days prior. So everyone should have seen this document.
Well, I'm looking at the one that got annotated by the city attorney.
Right, same document.
I got it.
If people have comments, thumbs up. People have comments, or if people want to let me know about comments later, do thumbs down, I guess. Or is everybody reading it now? Thumbs down. Okay. Everybody's reading it now. I'll give you a moment, I suppose.
Thumbs down feels far too negative. I don't think people are feeling thumbs down about it. I think they may be feeling like they need more time. But.
How about I stop talking so people could actually talk if they want to?
Okay, great.
I thought it looked good.
Me too. Thank you. Do folks feel prepared to take this up tonight, or what is the sense of the commission?
My question is, I'm perfectly ready to vote on it, but I'm not sure that everybody on the commission understands what language access plan is all about. And I think that's what we wanted. I think anyway, that's what we want to make sure that the commission understands what we're talking about.
I'm also comfortable voting on it this evening, and I guess I feel prepared to go forward, but I'm not sure whether other people have had that opportunity or want additional information.
My question is then, if you decide to call for a vote on it, will it be the corrections that were put in by the attorney? Wolfgang, speak to me.
Oh, I wasn't sure you were asking me. It would be, yes, with the corrections.
Yeah.
I would probably want to have a conversation with Allison when she's available, that she understands that we are asking for something that is specifically not language plan, access plan is not a legal term. In my understanding, it is more of a term d'art that has many definitions. And so the version that we are asking for would be above and beyond legal requirement that other language access plans often refer to. And so I would want to clarify that, because I think I would prefer to keep above and beyond legal requirement in there, because that is the plan that we are proposing, and it is distinctive in that way. So I think I would say this plan would be, what we would be voting on would be to take this resolution to council as written with the changes, subtracting the above and beyond legal requirement part. How do folks feel about that?
I agree with you on that, but I'm wondering if getting her response to that as to why she pulled it out, is that going to affect yours and my ultimate decision on how to go forward with it. And it's striking me that maybe we should wait till next month because it's in perfect order and we can have it in a form that we all agree with her edits. Maybe next month we won't have to spend but 2 minutes on it.
I say if we can put it before council, like as soon as possible, that's cool. If nobody has any substantive changes they want to make to it, then we can move this forward faster. I don't think we have to talk to Allison after reviewing this document. I think Allison has already made the changes. I just, since she's not here, would want to talk to her to make sure that we were on the same page, but I don't want to let that delay the process further, which is why I made the proposal that we pass it as is, minus that one part on the above and beyond legal requirement. And then I will just talk to her, send her an email later to make sure that like that really was the thing. And if it is this huge roadblock and we have to talk about it, then I'll be like, okay, let's come back to it. But otherwise, let's not keep it delayed.
I mean, I take your proposal, Wolfgang, as a motion to approve it, subject to that one caveat. Are we ready to have a vote on that?
Up to you.
Okay. All right. Thumbs up or an oral yes for those who want to vote yes. Any opposition? Anyone abstaining? All right, great. Thank you. So that has passed. Good work. Thank you. Thank you both on the accessibility committee. Is anything else from the accessibility committee?
Just that we do have word that for people who are watching that there is a new temporary ADA coordinator. And so that is exciting because we need one. Also, it is Alex Ikifuna. So people want to know that's what's happening in the city. Updates. I hope to talk to him soon.
Great. Community Engagement Committee.
Mary, if I may interrupt.
Yeah, sorry.
I liked the idea that we established when the next meeting would be for the housing. Would you like to do that for accessibility as well? First or second Thursday?
I'm good for the first Thursday. Sue, I think you're muted.
I can't do any more on the first Thursday.
Okay.
Okay. All right. How about the second?
It'll have to be the second for me.
The second at 6 o'clock?
Fine. That's fine. I thought we started at 6:30.
You said at 6:30?
Todd, remind me I thought they were starting at 6:30.
I believe the last time was 6:30, but yeah. Which would you prefer? Well,
because let me tell you, if the commission meets at 6:30 and the ad hoc committees meet at 6:30, it's in my head that anything to do with the Human Rights
Let's do 6:30.
6:30 sounds like
it is.
Unless it meets in the middle of the day.
6:30 it is in my calendar.
Okay.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank you.
All right. Community Engagement Committee. Did the Community Engagement Committee meet?
I don't know that anyone who was present for that meeting is here tonight.
Well, I propose we skip it then and move on to the Housing Committee. Catherine?
Sorry, I just wanted to know, is there, I got behind on meetings, is there a Community Engagement Committee regular meeting then for the month ahead?
I think that's a great thing. We should also suss out first or second Thursday preference.
The second for me.
Okay. Time? Do you want to start after
midday? Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we do it midday? Sorry.
Potentially. Check with Brian on that. Like 1 p.m.
I'm sorry. The first week, so I'm trying to look at the calendar. Yeah, that's fine. The second week is better for me. But yeah, can we do it midday?
Yeah, so that would be Thursday, October the 14th. Brian, would 1 p.m. work?
Yeah, the only
you,
cautionary note I would say to the commission is originally, you know, the concept was you could have these bonus meetings, and then we had up to 6 for the whole city to use. So what I'm hearing you say is you want to have 4 separate meetings, including a regular meeting in October.
It is starting to look that way. We were doing stacked meetings before. That is
so the stacking of committees, you know, obviously helps you limit the number of engagements. But
Sue and I could meet without public notice, so we can. I mean, we don't have anything on our agenda right now, so I wouldn't want to take up a spot for that. It could just be a check-in, so maybe we can back away and leave the spot open for somebody else.
Fine with me. Although I think Jessica said she wanted to be there.
Sorry, I missed that. Okay. Okay, well then.
No, I was saying for the community engagement, it's fine if we do it in the evening. That makes it so we can stack it. It's fine. So what time would that make it, Todd?
Depends on how long accessibility wants. If you want an hour, it would be 7:30. If you want half an hour, engagement would start at 7.
Is half an hour enough, Jeanette?
We can do half an hour for accessibility.
Okay. 7 p.m. start time. Okay, then on the second Thursday for engagement.
Yeah, 7 p.m.
Okay.
Last night.
Thanks for your flexibility.
All right, Housing Committee.
What did we do, Mary?
All right, well, I'll start with—
meetings are running together.
I know. I'll start with the one issue that I spent a little bit of time on, and that is the right to counsel. So, you know, we explored kind of what the city is prepared to do, and what it looks like is that there will be a contract with the Legal Aid Justice Center that will pay $300,000 over the course of 3 years. So that's basically $100,000 a year, which is kind of very different from what we had proposed. Initially, we had estimated that, you know, covering evictions at the pre-pandemic rate, which is of course lower than what we're likely to see, would cost $460,000 per year. So I was very, you know, sort of very disappointed to hear this, because, you know, earlier discussions were talking about a whole lot more money. And so it is my view that we should continue to advocate here for a more robust approach and plan, and to really push. I mean, we've had counselors actually talking about how they adopted the right to counsel, and that just turns out to be false. I mean, I don't mean that anyone is, you know, sort of deliberately misled, but it didn't happen. It hasn't happened. And I think a follow-up advocacy in the form of a letter and presentation to council is what I think is called for, and I'm happy to take the lead on drafting something, or, you know, somebody else on the committee could do that. But that's kind of where we have we spent some time in the Housing Committee talking about that.
Mary, I think we also, you and I met with Allison Davies to request a legal review of state law to determine whether or not right to counsel, and there was another thing I can't remember, but so to see if there was any prohibition or if enabling legislation was needed to pass an ordinance, right?
We did have that conversation because there's been some discussion about whether it would be possible for the city to adopt an ordinance actually giving people that right. And that seems unclear about whether the city has the authority to do that. So Allison has agreed to look into that, and we could either recommend that the city adopt such an ordinance, or we can recommend that the city have as part of its legislative agenda, pushing the state to change the law to allow them to do so. But it's unclear at this moment which of those two things we can do. But I think we can certainly push the city to allocate more funds and to do this in a more robust way. So I would, I would propose that we've already, sort of gone on record with this advocacy and with this position. I don't think it requires a change in position in any way. It just requires kind of follow-up advocacy.
Right, and the other thing we talked about was working on messaging, and the letter that we've discussed tonight, getting statements out from Human Rights Commission in support of increased density and increased support for affordable housing in the city, but also perhaps drafting a letter to the editor for the Daily Progress or CVille Tomorrow or something from the Human Rights Commission that squarely talks about housing as a human right, to help counter the ugly narratives that are out there from the loudmouths. So I'm seeing a lot of nods. People seem to feel like that's an okay thing. Okay.
How can we support that effort?
I'm happy to take the lead on drafting something, and I can get feedback on it if you like.
I'd be happy to help draft and edit.
Okay. And we should probably, my experience with the Daily Progress has been that it's taken quite a while to get the last few letters out there. I don't know if coming from the Human Rights Commission, we would jump the queue a little bit, or if we should maybe work with CVille Tomorrow or a different outlet. We can talk about that maybe offline. Okay.
All right. Moving on to the Legal Representation Committee. I think that was a place where we, Todd, that was the other place where we talked to Allison, right? About what legal representation might look like with regard to complainants versus the tenants and eviction proceedings.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's correct. And I think we did look at a little bit the draft resolution. I think we're still, you all are going to still read over that and think about it a little bit more. And I've talked a little bit to one of the people in procurement about how that would work. If that was going to be, if we look at it as a pilot program, that we'd have to do what we call like an RFQ, like request for quotes from local attorneys, and then have them apply as vendors, or if it would be a reimbursement program for people who sought the service. So we've got some details to work on still, but yeah, we're kind of still figuring that out. And I'm going to also kind of do some calculations based on the legal representation that we've gotten pro bono to see, what may be an approximate cost per case. We've had very few that have had legal representation, but we might be able to get a little bit of information on that. So
do we need to set another committee meeting on that, or is it, we're kind of waiting for data before we can do that?
It's a great question. Yeah, I guess the question would be how quickly can I can I get some of that data for you? Well, if we were to do that, you know, right now we've got our first Thursday at 1 p.m. You've got the housing. I think it was you and Catherine were on the housing committee. Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
Can we make legal representation at 1:30?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sure, that'll light a fire for me to get a little bit more information before that date.
Great. And then finally, the Legislative Agenda Committee. We sort of met, but not a whole lot happened. We decided we were going to explore what recommendations had been made in the past and bring kind of those requests to the full commission, because my recollection was that it was that attendance was sparse. That would be.
I think it was just you.
yeah, that's it was. But I do think that we got some really good feedback and ideas, you know, in the housing arena from our presentations today about what we might include in at least as part of our legislative agenda.
Yeah, and just to think about timelines here, you know, you do want to get something to council, and you know, to be fair, if you don't have a solid set of recommendations to offer this year, that's reasonable. But now just think about how you want to schedule this in the future to make sure that you're kind of have enough, I guess, advanced time to think about it and plan for it, so you can, if you have something that's really burning that you'd like to lift up, that you have the ability to do it and the capacity to do it.
What is the you know, what is a sort of deadline / timeline? I mean, it seems to me, for example, that some of these, the suggestions that came from our presenters this evening about, you know, rent control, just cause eviction, you know, your idea about the rental registry, like all of those things are things that we could lift up as part of a proposed legislative agenda. There certainly could be, you know, many other things as well, but those seem to be kind of consistent with the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, if that's of interest to the commission to lift those up, we just have to draft them, and they really would. To be fair, I don't know that you'd be able to have another committee. You could try to have another commission meeting before you lift them up, but I do not think that there's time to do that again, which was kind of what we had hoped for with the committee, legislative committee meeting, to be able to draft and present. But yeah, I think that we'd have to put that into the chair's authority to maybe draft and submit through discussion tonight, because I don't think the time frame would allow anything more than that.
What do people think about those, about our supporting those sort of housing related legislative changes? And, you know, we'd have to make that decision here this evening. Okay. I know we're all fading here. Let's just a few more minutes. Okay. All right. So
I think that makes perfect sense.
All right.
Yes.
I see a lot of thumbs up. Any opposition to that? All right. I will work on that. And I think we can, I can certainly circulate it and, you know, get, yeah, of course. Okay. That has taken us through our committees. I'm sorry that we're, you know, running long this evening, but we have come to the point in our agenda where we would love to hear from any members of the public. If you are a webinar attendee, you can use the raise hand function. If you're on the phone, use *9, and we would love to hear any public comment that any listeners have to share.
I did see that Ange Khan had her hand up earlier. I don't know if she's still there. And Adrian Dent.
Okay. All right. Actually, I see 2 hands up. That's great.
Yep, 2 hands. I'm going to make the decision that I don't know. Ange had her hand up earlier. If that's okay, I'm going to go ahead and permit to talk first.
Hi, good evening. This is my first Human Rights Commission meeting. So I was interested in if there is a brief overview for those who are newly attending, that a brief overview of what the commission does. I know you all went through your different committees, but if there is like a brief description to give to the public without them having to do like a lot of research, just for people that are just tuning in. Also, one of the things that I've been noticing in the community is that there is a huge problem with the landlords. And this isn't only my observation. I'm sure this has been going on for longer than probably my recognition of it. And, but I think it's come to the point where, you know, we really need to tackle that problem. We have landlords that are raising rents. We have landlords that are discriminated against household size. We also have landlords, and not only landlords, but property management. And I don't know how far this commission can go with that, since they're like their own business or whatever, but they have these policies in place to where they will, you know, where they can be discriminatory. Like, you know, it's written in their policy that this is our policy. I actually had someone say this to me because I had to figure it out on my own. I'm like, why are people getting denied? Where there are actually these policies that, you know, if a person qualifies on A, B, and C, then they throw in C or D just to throw them off, so they're not able to rent. It would be, oh, well, this property doesn't take a Section 8 voucher, or this, or, oh, you have too many children for a 4-bedroom apartment or a house, which doesn't make any sense to me. So, I mean, there are all of these barriers that are in place for folks, and I'm not exactly sure what you all would be willing to do on that matter. Also, as far as housing questions, barriers that are on the application process. You know, if you've had a felony or a misdemeanor, that should not exclude you from having housing, because housing, as someone said, I think it was Catherine, is a human right, right? And so these are barriers that allow for landlords to discriminate. So I don't know if I have time. I'm not even sure about this process, but there's a lot of barriers on a lot of these housing applications that prohibit folks from having housing, and housing that they could afford with a voucher. And I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will have a moment to respond to public comments, but we'll take, I think, our second public comment, and then we'll have an opportunity for response.
Adrian, you have permission to talk.
And good evening. So I've been listening. My mind is kind of a little swirly right now because there's just so many committee meetings and so much being said in different spaces. But I wanted to ask that you clearly endorse the affordable housing overlay. I just referred to affirm your intention to do so. I also think that advocating for some clarity in language or consistency in language around what the affordable housing plan and that strategy is eventually with the FLUM, to be clear in that. I also, I don't know what you can do about this, but I think I'm a little concerned after the Planning Commission meeting that 2 planning commissioners won't make the next meeting, which is a pretty critical meeting. So I think any weighing in from you all on the critical nature of the timing might help with that. I don't know. I think it's positive that council during the Planning Commission, like several council members expressed an interest in participating in the next work session around the FLUM. And so I think generally the timing of any statements from you in the near future would be really helpful in encouraging forward movement. I also, Sam Sanders, I think it was at the HAC meeting, shared that there's going to be a new department forming called the Department of Community Solutions. I don't know if you were aware of that, but the language is intentionally shaped to among other things, to prioritize increased capacity to address the affordable housing crisis. So that's a positive, at least stated intention. And basically I have a lot of concern about all the denial of there being even an affordable housing crisis. So definitely a strong voice from you all would be helpful. More voices, more strength to stating the obvious and kind of reframing the whole narrative and consistently attending to framing the narrative around the realities that Dan and Sunshine shared. And I also think that an op-ed piece would be a strong statement. There have been a couple in Charlottesville Tomorrow lately that I think have really generated some good conversation. And I feel strongly that Charlottesville Tomorrow would be happy to publish a message from you all. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Any additional comments from the public?
I don't think so. I see 2 hands raised still, but I think those may be the hands raised from previously. So, all
right. Well, next up is commission response to matters by the public, and I was hoping, Todd, you might give a succinct kind of explanation about what the Office of Human Rights does and what the commission does, and I'm sure other folks can jump in.
Yeah, happy to do that. Yeah, and so I think, Ange, your first part of your question was, what does the commission do? And the commission's, has several different priorities. One of which is to provide recommendations to City Council, and that's often revolving around systemic concerns in city policy. They also have the authority to raise legislative ideas each year so that those can be taken to the General Assembly. They also can do education and outreach activities in the community. So those are a number of the things they do. In conjunction with the Office of Human Rights, they also act as sort of a adjudicating body for complaints that are filed through the Office of Human Rights that are investigated and found to have probable cause to believe that the Human Rights Ordinance was violated. So to make that a little bit clearer, so the Office of Human Rights accepts complaints of individual complaints of discrimination, and we look to see if they're within our jurisdiction under state law as well as our local ordinance to investigate, and if so, we can do that work. And I think to your finer point of what can be done about some of the things that you've observed, whether it's in the application process or in the rent criteria, all of those things. If you know of an individual who's experiencing or thinks they may be experiencing housing discrimination, send them my way, because those things are always best looked at sort of with the microscope to see what's actually going on and to figure out whether it is a violation of Virginia Fair Housing Law and that sort of thing. So yes, Sue just dropped a note in the comment. I believe on the Human Rights Commission page on the city website, there is a brief description of what the commission does. The Human Rights Ordinance itself has the more detailed description of what the commission does, which, and to be honest, it's changed a little bit because there were some amendments passed recently, some of which aren't enacted yet. Some will be enacted next year. So in any case, that's another place to look. The Office of Human Rights page on the city website also has a bit of an overview of what we do. And I believe Jessica just dropped the link in the chat. I'm not sure if attendees can see the chat, unfortunately, but if you can, that's where the link is. It's relatively easy to find. If you can't, shoot me an email, call me on the phone. I'll happily talk you through more of those details. But hopefully that was semi-succinct and clear description.
Yeah, and I would just say to follow up, like I think we are, as a commission, deeply concerned with the issues kind of both of our speakers raised. Certainly, we're aware that there is housing discrimination, and something it's kind of core to our mission that we are concerned about that and want to take action, and appreciate the public comments. Other commissioners? All right, commissioner updates. Jessica?
Yes, I know we're really late and I think we should have this as a discussion, but I just feel that I have to bring it up. There's a lot that's happening in our city and we want to advocate for justice and equality. We keep losing Black people. And I'm really disheartened with the disrespect that our mayor has experienced, and even what's happened with Chief Brackney. And I can't sit here and not say anything about it. So I know we are like way over time, but I think I want to have this discussion with the commission in our next meeting.
Right.
And I will second that with her as well.
All right. Yeah, I think to have a sort of fulsome discussion about this important topic, I do think, not to punt, but I do think, putting it early in the agenda in the next meeting makes sense. Other updates from commissioners?
I have an update in that next meeting is my last meeting. So there.
we won't be in person, I think, to have a
I was hoping we could be in person.
I would be happy to bring treats if we were allowed to meet in person.
That's what I was hoping for.
I'm not sure that's going to happen yet, though. Is there a plan, Todd, at this moment, or is the city still
advertising yet?
No, Brian and I were talking about that a little bit ahead of the meeting. No, I feel like we are not moving towards in-person meetings anytime soon. Maybe perhaps we can box up some treats and mail them to you. So, although they may get lost in the mail, given the mail.
Just a gift certificate to hotcakes or something. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that at you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Sue. We will be sure to recognize that next time. I'm sorry that we won't be able to have a cake, because that would have been fun. Any other updates, folks?
I just want to thank those of you, Catherine, Mary, Wolfgang, who are doing follow-up work. I have just found it impossible the past couple of months to follow up on things I said. So I'm so grateful for those of you that are helping to draft the different statements, and I hope to contribute to my level of ability. So thanks. And that was a good conversation today.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for sticking with us, because it's not city council level of 1 a.m, but it's still people have little kids and things to do, and so I appreciate everybody sticking with us. So.
I actually haven't eaten yet.
Oh no! All right. Well, we'll. I think this is the last matter on our agenda. So if there are no additional commissioner updates, then I think we have a number of next steps that we've already identified. And I believe the next matter on our agenda is to adjourn.
Yay. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks you so much. And
thanks all.
We will be in touch with follow-up for
you,
sure.
Good night.
All right. Thanks, everybody.